Welcome to the PolyPsych podcast. This is your host, Anthony Lindsay.
And Stephanie Marino.
We're here with Ansley Booker. You want to talk about STEM programs in particular, which was fascinating to us because as far as expected job growth for STEM majors, all occupations are expected to grow about 14%, but mathematics is expected to grow at 16%, and system software developers 32%, medical sciences 36%, and biomedical engineers 62%. All right, so as far as the STEM fields, like, would you recommend everyone switching over to a STEM field?
And it's great that you asked that question because that's actually the focus of my dissertation, and I am looking at the statistics to advocate for more students to obtain STEM degrees. But when I advise my students, I always say to them, choose something that you're passionate about, because just because there's the largest growth of jobs in that sector, or that job sector is going to project it to make the most money. And if you go there and you obtain a degree and you're not passionate about it, then you're going to burn out and then leave the actual career field. And we've seen a lot of students in past that have actually obtained a job in a STEM major or STEM discipline, and then they work for a year to 6 months, and then they actually leave the sector because it wasn't what they expected. So I always tell my students to look at projected job growth, make sure that's something you're passionate about, and then also make sure that it is something where you can see yourself developing a career over a long period of time. And the best way to do that is to actually do job shadowing when you're in your undergraduate experience or even an internship, so you know the day-to-day things to expect in that particular job.
That's a great answer. Do you think that the liberal arts studies are kind of going extinct?
No, I don't think so, because as you know, there's a plethora of jobs in the world that future students can take hold of. It's just that sometimes technology seems to be the focus of most of the jobs that are being innovated in this century. So I would not say they're extinct, because obviously there has to still be jobs in the liberal arts sectors, because not everyone is going to be conducive to a STEM job or even want to major in STEM, if that makes sense. So I still think there needs to be an avenue for those colleges, because there are colleges and universities that base their whole entire disciplines and majors on liberal arts, and then those that focus heavily on research. So I think there has to be a balance.
Agreed. I like that.
So there's been at least for us, there was always a barrier for entering the job that we wanted. So I wanted to be, when I first started undergrad, I wanted to be a surgeon. I'm going to go through a STEM program in school. I'm going to go to medical school. Then I'm going to become a surgeon. And I'm a straight A student. So I got a C in chemistry, and I said, I can't. I won't. I'm not going to be a doctor. I'm just not going to do it. And I switched. I was like, I'm going to political science. I think if I can't be the absolute best at every aspect of it, well, then I'm just not going to do it. So do you think there's a barrier to certain professions where it's not necessarily indicative how you do in undergrad or graduate school for how you're going to do in the profession? So if you say you did get a C in chemistry, that doesn't necessarily mean you're going to be a bad doctor. Or maybe you did get a C in mathematics in algebra too, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be a bad biomedical engineer.
Well, I work with a lot of students, and myself, I have a master's in a undergraduate in STEM disciplines. And I will say to students, there are expectations for being in STEM disciplines. You know, they're very rigorous. Most students are training for STEM disciplines beginning in high school. And even some far back as elementary and middle school by taking those rigorous AP courses in calculus and algebra 1 and advanced placement biology. So there is expectations that if you want to be a doctor, you want to be a surgeon, you want to be an engineer, that you have to be at the top of your class, in order to get a job. And that's not necessarily true. However, if you're going on to graduate school, what they do tend to look at is your GPA. So just because you had a C in one class doesn't mean that means that should be the end of your STEM career. Myself personally, I made grades that weren't my necessarily brightest in certain classes because I wasn't as strong in that discipline. But what I will say to students is that even if you are applying to grad school or you want to keep matriculating through, there may come a point when either you may have to, 1, retake the class, 2, before you get the C, try to reach out to the academic support systems on their campus to try to improve your grade, Three, also talk to your professor because they have the best knowledge about that content area and maybe being able to provide you with some assistance to further your education in that field. And then lastly, just make sure that you stay the course. So if there does come a time that you have to explain that particular C you might have made, if you're going to try to get into graduate school, then you can explain it. Well, this particular semester, I wasn't going this well. I wasn't strong in this area. However, the next semester I took this class and made a B or made an A. You know what I mean? Because even if you're applying to graduate school or you're applying to get into medical school, having a 2.0 is not, which is what we like mostly C's, it's not going to make you very competitive to someone who had a 4.0, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So I don't think you should be discouraged because I've made a C in my undergraduate career. You don't want to get discouraged. However, you do want to make sure that it doesn't necessarily become a repetitive thing, if that makes sense. So if you do make a grade that you're not proud of, that you go back next semester and you try harder because that C is going to come out as a 2.0 on a 4.0 scale, and that is going to factor into your GPA. And if you want to be competitive when applying to medical school and applying to graduate school, then you have to have those upper level grades. Now, I also tell my students you have to be real with yourself. If you find that you're in your junior year and you're taking Cal 1, 2, 3, and 4 are in front of you and you're not doing very well, you probably need to talk to your advisor, get some family support people, or talk to people in your profession and say, hey, this is where I'm at right now. I'm struggling. Do you see this as a perceivable future for myself when talking to your advisor and those other people I've recommended there? And if so, then you continue on and you just buckle down and get the work done because these are very, very strenuous majors. They come with a lot of math-intensive courses, science-intensive, and it's not for the weary, you know. You're going to spend a lot of time in study hall, reading books, advanced level research journals and papers, and you have to be literally committed. So some things you may not enjoy some other aspects of college when trying to pursue these disciplines, but you still should have a good work-life balance. And just going back to making sure that you're able to discern if this career is for you, just be honest. Like I have a lot of students that want to be engineers, but they're making C's, D's, and almost F's, and their GPA is plummeting. So I was like, hey, let's talk about this. Is this the career path that you truly want? Do you think you can do better the next semester, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? And if they see that it's not going to work out for them, sometimes they change to something they're a little bit more passionate about and can actually graduate, because the more time you spend in college, the more money you're spending per semester, and you don't want to be here 6-7 years working on a 4-year degree when you maybe could have had time in your junior year and decide maybe this is not the career for me or the major for me and switch that and then use those same credits to get you a degree and for a job that you could see yourself actually pursuing.
Huh. So do you think that they should pursue a job that they are necessarily going to be better for or a job that they prefer? Or should they go for the job that they're going to be best at? So I personally, I would have preferred to be a doctor. Mm-hmm. But it turns out I had a C in chemistry. Let's go down a different road. Mm-hmm. And it turns out that straight A's in political science. So would it have been better to continue to push for the job that I really, really wanted or to go for the profession that I feel most competent in?
And I think that is one of the biggest, literally life decisions that you have to make. And, because this is a career that you could be in 30, 40 years, because based upon life expectancy and retirement and investment, we're expected now to work 30, 40 years. So that's something you have to ask yourself. Is this something I really, truly want to do? And again, if I made a C in undergrad, how is that going to play out in medical school? If that makes sense. Will I matriculate through medical school? Will I make it those 3 years to go through clinical rotations and go through residency? That's something I really want. And I always tell my students, because I'm still in grad school myself, is that college and education doesn't stop at your undergraduate level, if that makes sense. So if you want to go back to school and get a master's, even if you want to now go back to school and get that doctorate degree or become a medical professional, you can. All you would need to do, because you can actually apply to medical school with various levels of undergraduate degrees, right? Mm-hmm. You can take the MCAT and then persist through, if that makes sense. Because you'll still have a GPA, you'd have a good MCAT score and still go. For me personally, I didn't continue to pursue I got a master's in pharmacy, but I didn't go to pharmacy school because what I was able to do was then to say, hey, what I'm really passionate about, and that's where the joint venture came for me in the role, is actually helping people and teaching. So then what I did was I actually applied my STEM background to then becoming a professor and becoming a administrator and then pursuing a PhD that way. So there's multiple avenues to tie all of the disciplines and the things that you're passionate about to actually make a career. You would just have to then map that out. I've known people to go to med school with political science degrees, with, various undergraduate degrees. It's just about mapping that out and how that can play out for you.
Makes sense.
So how do you think schools are preparing students to pursue STEM fields when they're in high school up through undergrad, like to prepare them for these extremely rigorous professions?
Well, for me, literature has shown through the Office of Civil Rights and various other studies that some of the high schools are not as rigorous as others. They've shown racial disparities with African American and Latino students not being able to have advanced courses in math and science, and so therefore that leads to sometimes a lack of confidence in those areas when they try to persist through undergraduate studies. Some schools have shown that school districts are doing the best thing they can to advance STEM by following multiple models that they have adapted from the U.S. Department of Education as well from that local state government to persist those students through. And overall, I would say that if we are going to push for larger STEM initiatives, there has to be a greater push for minorities to make sure they have access to all the resources in terms of competent teachers, in terms of resources, which includes research assistantships that may be available, financial assistantships that may be available, advanced courses in calculus, algebra, and things of that nature so that they feel confident and secure. Same thing will be also for women. Sometimes they don't feel as confident as their male counterpart because of their lack of preparation through the K through 12 pipeline. And even they go on to persist through graduate school, some of those same variables can then affect them for pursuing graduate and professional studies. So there is work to be done on the collegiate level as well as the K through 12 level to adequately prepare minorities as well as women for STEM disciplines, because we have a lot of men that are matriculating through with these degrees, but we have less minority men and less women actually pushing through because of various barriers.
So is it a budgetary issue, do you think, like especially in urban settings, like for urban schools? Do you think that if we increase the budget, would that help, or is that not even a factor?
I think money is always a resource issue for the K through 12 system. I don't work in the K through 12 system. These are things I would have read and received from people that do work in the system. I do think there is a need because a lot of states are actually offering additional grants and monies for teachers that are coming in the STEM and the math disciplines to actually teach in these urban settings because they don't have as many teachers in those areas. So it could be back a budgetary issue. It could be then the focus of the school system that they're in. Do they feel that STEM is necessary? Are they receiving federal funds or federal dollars or grants to push forward and get smart boards in the classroom to get more STEM equipment, science-based electives in the classroom? So that would be a personal choice left up to that school district. So for me, it could be a budgetary issue. There's not enough money in the budget to hire these teachers. And then it could be an issue if there's not enough to place these computers in the classroom to provide coding classes, to provide for these advanced level classes. Because with STEM, if you're taking any kind of science classes in undergraduate, there's a lot of equipment that's involved. And that same equipment will then have to be used in the K through 12 sector. So it could be a budget issue because universities usually have a lot more money and they're not bound and tied to the same regulations as sometimes with the K through 12 school system. So that very well could be an issue.
So I'm president of the United States. It's 30 something, and I'm president of the United States, and you're going to be you're my Secretary of Education. All right.
Okay.
So
great job.
Appreciate it. So the one of the policy issues I want you to fix is STEM education, especially in minority communities. All right. I would like for, we're doing a 100% scholarship for any minority that goes into a STEM field. All right. Like, how do you fix the situation in urban schools so that they are fully able to get through STEM fields?
I think first there has to come an assessment to understand what each particular school system is facing, because there may be a deficit in teachers in one sector, and there may be a deficit in necessarily like resources in another. If that makes sense. So if we could have some kind of assessment, whether that comes from the state level or the local level, how that matriculates back up to the Secretary of Education, so that we can adequately determine what school systems need what. Because as you know, sometimes school systems are disproportionately giving money or receive grants, however they receive their money. Some may be charter schools. So once you do that, I then think once we have an assessment from each school board and we understand what they need, whether it's teacher salary increases, whether it is assistance with SAT and ACT prep, then what we can use is, like, for instance, where I work, which is through a federal program, we could then have those resources then allocated to target those communities where minorities are then not receiving a fair amount of resources, and then push for those minorities to get what they have, if that makes sense. I do think there has to be some type of teacher training that is instituted. If more teachers are then able to go into STEM discipline, maybe some recruitment factors that need to be done, partnerships with local community agencies, and then even universities and technical colleges, because if those are in the areas that are close to those minority campuses, maybe then they can facilitate with the local school system to try to bring in some more initiatives for those schools. So I would start this necessarily with an assessment to see where we are, and then see what local, state, and then national resources we can then pull into those areas, so that not necessarily just minorities, but all students are reached, and all students have accessibility to STEM education, if that is what they are desiring to continue. And that literally has to go back as far as 3rd and 4th grade, because research has shown that you must introduce STEM and get students interested in it by the 3rd or 4th grade, or then if not, they lose their interest in it or their potential to see a career trajectory. You have to make sure we increase the number of women that are in the classroom, as well as the number of minorities that are in the classroom, because studies have shown that when students see teachers and faculty and staff that look like them and actually have the jobs they desire to have, they're more likely to matriculate into that field. And then lastly, we just have to break this culture that STEM is only for males, it's only for certain populations, and that STEM can be actually for everyone. Because I think we break that culture, that stigma, I think more students would be inclined to push towards STEM. So that may include, another thing I like to do would be advertising, doing commercials, doing video projects, doing movies, whatever it takes to reach the students. And saying, hey, these are women that are in STEM, these are men that are in STEM, they look like me, they look like you, however that is disseminated to students, whether that's through literature, whether that's through videos, whether that's through programming, just to show them that this is possible, this is something that can be done. If you feel as though you're at a financial disadvantage, we can provide, like you said, the scholarships for those students that want to pursue STEM, and make sure that they're tangible scholarships so that the students do know how they can apply, and that they then can go to college, pursue an undergraduate degree with this scholarship, pursue a graduate degree, and then make sure that one is at the collegiate level, that they actually have a support system that helps them to actually matriculate and go through. So if they do, like you said, make a seed that they feel as though they are still competent, and we can push them through college. And then once they're in college, to make sure they have some resources to then attach them to a career. Because once they're attached to a career, then you can look at the United States labor statistics to make sure these students are graduating from high school, graduating from college. So you're basically fixing this pipeline, and then they're actually going into the career that they like. So that would have to be tracking these students to make sure they're moving through the pipeline, that they're going from K through 12 to career, and they have the support and resources they need to make at each level, whether that's teaching resources, whether that's additional help in the classroom, and whether that's financial support. So
that's brilliant.
It'll be a long-term thing that attaches from the national, state, and then local level. So it has to be a buy-in from a lot of different people.
No, I'd imagine. But every time I look at the labor statistics or the job projections, like STEM always seems like it's like the field to definitely go into. I mean, it's nothing against liberal arts. I mean, both me and my wife, we both did a liberal arts study, but the STEM field definitely seems like the way to go. I like the STEM majors. I like how much they make. I like the profession in general, and a lot of the professions I think most people not only respect, but they thoroughly would enjoy as their profession. Unfortunately, like I'm not good at math, so I agree
with her point that it needs to be made more available, though. Like, yeah, 100%. I definitely agree with that. As far as maybe I think a lot of people are being steered or like kind of treating STEM fields as like taboo almost because they automatically feel like they don't have the like aptitude for it.
Mm-hmm.
Like me. Mm-hmm. I didn't. But then again, how much of that is because I'm just an artsy fartsy brain, and how much of that is like I didn't really have access to like STEM programs per se.
Yeah, when you were growing up, you didn't really have access. I think you did.
I wasn't geared toward it either.
Yeah,
like I wasn't encouraged toward it either. Like surprisingly enough, because my mom is like super math brained, but you know she just always encouraged me to go with what I really liked, and you know it just so happens that what I like is psychology. That's what I love. I wouldn't choose it even if I had the extra like know-how in the STEM fields. I wouldn't choose it. But I think some people would if they had that access.
Me, like I think I would have gone into medical school, but I don't know. Like I feel like you have to balance out like what you are best at. I mean, she was saying that's like the big life decision you have to make is like competence versus like what do you actually want? Competence versus passion. So I don't know. Yeah, I'm passionate about being a doctor, but if I can't be the absolute best at it, then hard pass. Like
that's your preference.
4.0 in political science. I'm just gonna go that way.
That's admirable. Like if you really want to be a doctor, but you know that you won't be the best doctor, like it's admirable to take that step back. You don't have to do that because you could still be a perfectly respectable doctor. A perfectly respectable doctor. I'm not saying you would be like you'd barely skate by. You'd be a wonderful doctor, but
you're not the best at it.
You wouldn't be the best. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing to say that either. Like you can't just predict that off of 1 C in chemistry. Like maybe you didn't get enough like advising or.
Yeah, probably working 40 hours a week probably hurt me a little bit. But I worked 40 hours a week and did political science, still got a 4.0.
Because you're more adept at it, and that's fine.
Yeah, that's the one you should go with then.
Maybe. The one that you can multitask and still like...
Yeah, because when you're 100% focused on it, imagine what it would be. Like if all I did was political science, can you imagine?
Yeah, I just think the STEM fields are like, they're one of those like practical...
Yeah,
like full on efficient. You know, you're a machine.
Yeah, when you
go into those fields.
What major are you on? Political science. You can see the that's too bad.
That's not fair.
Versus like if I say I'm going to biomedical engineering, what?
That's not fair. That's just to say that you know your day is mapped out from beginning to end. When you're an engineer major, you've got like a hard plan, and if you divert from that plan, you could get left behind. And with political science, psychology, maybe you don't have to have that. Maybe you don't have to have your day rigorously mapped out. Maybe you have a little bit of time to like just sit and contemplate the world a little bit, which I prefer to do.
Yeah, it's way more fun.
It's not just fun; it can also be productive in my field. I would rather seek a possibility rather than a hard answer. It's just the differences in the way people like to live, the way people like to think.
That's it for the show, I guess. Go to polypsych.org and sign up for a membership.
Sound a little bit more enthusiastic.
Oh, yeah. It's go to polypsych.org. Down. Sign up for a membership. Membership is free. Join the Academic Social Network where we can interview you one-on-one with any cool research findings you have or anything cool you're doing in undergrad or high school. Cheers.
All right.